One shocking secret about Gianluigi Donnarumma has every top club panicking. We discovered the real reason Pep Guardiola broke his own rule to sign him. Stick until the end to see the footage that exposes his true weakness. The first time Gianluigi Donnarumma stood between the posts in a packed stadium, the weight of history was already leaning toward him. Not as a promise, but as a demand. Because goalkeepers in Italy are never just players. They are judgments waiting to happen, and he was still a boy when that judgment arrived without mercy. Born in Castellammare di Stabia, near Naples, in 1999, his frame betrayed his age long before his face did. And when AC Milan handed him responsibility normally reserved for men a decade older, it was not framed as a gamble, but as an inevitability disguised as courage. At 16, when most footballers are still learning how to hide fear, Gianluigi Donnarumma was asked to confront it in its purest form, standing alone while thousands watched for the slightest crack. That calm did not come from nowhere. It came from repetition, from long afternoons in youth football, where shots came harder and faster because coaches sensed something rare and wanted to see if it would break. It never did. When his Serie A debut arrived, it did not feel like an introduction so much as a confirmation, as if the stadium itself understood that this was not a temporary experiment. The saves were not theatrical. They were controlled, and that restraint unsettled opponents more than acrobatics ever could. Milan won, and Gianluigi Donnarumma stayed in goal. And suddenly, the question was no longer whether he belonged, but how long the rest of the world would be allowed to wait. By the time he reached adulthood, he had already lived several careers. Over 200 appearances before turning 22 does something to a goalkeeper's mind, compressing mistakes and triumphs into a single emotional muscle that either hardens or collapses. His hardened penalty shootouts became arenas where he seemed to grow taller with each step forward. Records fell quietly, including becoming the youngest goalkeeper to reach 100 Serie A appearances. And inside San Siro, belief turned into expectation, the most dangerous transition of all. The comparisons arrived early and refused to leave. Gianluigi Buffon loomed over every save, every mistake, every contract negotiation, as if Italian football demanded lineage as much as excellence. The pressure intensified not because of performances, but because of silence. Contracts became conversations everyone heard about, but no one could finish. Rumors bled into match days. Loyalty was debated as if it were a tactical choice. Even after renewing once, suspicion lingered. And when AC Milan finally returned to the Champions League after years of absence, it felt like a natural moment for celebration that instead became a farewell without ceremony. Gianluigi Donnarumma left the club that raised him without a transfer fee, and the absence of money somehow made the departure louder, sharper, more personal. He was 22 and already framed as both prodigy and traitor, depending on where you stood. Before the echoes of that decision settled, Wembley intervened. The European Championship in 2021 was not supposed to belong to goalkeepers, but tournaments rarely obey expectations, and Italy's journey turned into a series of moments that demanded refusal more than creativity. Gianluigi Donnarumma refused bids that bent toward destiny, refused pressure that swallowed others. And when England and Italy reached the final, the stadium transformed into a theater of inevitability that waited for someone to blink. Penalties stripped football of illusion, and when Gianluigi Donnarumma saved the final kick, he did not celebrate wildly. He simply walked forward, as if this outcome had been written somewhere private long before. At 22, he was named Player of the Tournament, a goalkeeper crowned above attackers and playmakers, and Europe accepted what Italy already knew. Paris arrived with luxury and suspicion intertwined. Paris Saint-Germain offered trophies, but not certainty, because Keylor Navas was already there, already loved, already proven. Rotations followed, and for the first time since adolescence, Gianluigi Donnarumma was not the automatic answer. The competition was professional but suffocating, and mistakes suddenly mattered more because they were magnified by choice. His Champions League debut for Paris Saint-Germain came against Manchester City, an opponent that would later define his future, and he kept a clean sheet with an authority that suggested patience rather than defiance. Still, patience was tested in Madrid, where a single moment playing out from the back ignited a collapse against Real Madrid that rewrote the narrative overnight. Fault was assigned freely, context ignored completely, and the idea that greatness could coexist with imperfection became inconvenient. Errors followed him like shadows that critics pretended were destinations. Juventus punished misjudgments. Arsenal capitalized in the group stage. Data analysts quantified mistakes, reducing complexity into numbers that demanded reaction. Yet the arc did not bend downward. It steadied. Keylor Navas eventually moved aside, and the goal became his alone. Trophies arrived predictably in domestic competitions, but Paris Saint-Germain never measured success there, because dominance without Europe felt hollow. That emptiness finally disappeared in a season that redefined the club's identity. The treble came, and with it, a Champions League run shaped by survival rather than spectacle. Against Liverpool, Aston Villa, and Arsenal, Gianluigi Donnarumma stood as the final argument against elimination, stretching limbs where logic failed. The semi-final against Arsenal became a masterclass in denial, a night where even Mikel Arteta acknowledged that the difference was not tactical, but human. A goalkeeper who refused to yield. Winning everything should have brought permanence. Instead, it brought reassessment. Luis Enrique valued control above rescue, comfort on the ball above dominance in the air. And while Gianluigi Donnarumma was not deficient with his feet, he was not obsessed with them either. Contract negotiations stalled again, familiar and exhausting, and suddenly matches arrived where he did not start. Lucas Chevalier appeared. Messages were sent without being spoken. A treble-winning goalkeeper was no longer untouchable, and football reminded him that validation expires faster than form. Manchester waited quietly. Ederson Moraes had defined an era there, not through saves, but through distribution, becoming an extra defender, a midfielder in gloves. When that chapter approached its end, Manchester City did not look for imitation. They looked for contrast. The opportunity to sign Gianluigi Donnarumma arrived with a price that felt unreal for a European champion in his mid-20s, and Pep Guardiola moved decisively, unburdened by nostalgia. The transfer surprised many, not because of quality, but because of philosophy, as if City were admitting that control alone could no longer answer every question. His debut came without protection, thrown into a Manchester derby where pressure does not ask permission. Gianluigi Donnarumma responded with stillness, commanding his area, silencing momentum, keeping a clean sheet that ended speculation immediately. Week by week, his presence altered behavior. Defenders pressed higher knowing retreat was possible. Crosses felt manageable. Set pieces lost menace. The ball left his foot with intention rather than obligation. Short when necessary, long when sensible. Pep Guardiola adjusted without apology, allowing flexibility where rigidity once ruled, trading a fraction of possession for the assurance that mistakes would not automatically become goals. Moments accumulated quietly. A Champions League match against Villarreal offered a glimpse into evolution rather than imitation, pressed inside his own box. Gianluigi Donnarumma slipped a left-footed pass past the A defender and found John Stones not to perform but to survive. A distinction Pep Guardiola understands deeply. Clean sheets followed. So did saves that felt inevitable only in hindsight. Manchester City did not sign a goalkeeper to play like Ederson Moraes. They signed one to erase consequences, and the system bent accordingly. Tell me if you think he is already a top 3 goalkeeper in the world. Let me know which club made the biggest mistake letting him go. Follow for the next transfer secret they are trying to hide. Drop your take on his greatest ever performance in the comments.